So this is going to be some general tips to get you guys going on the right path when you start with your 3D modeling. So for me, when I first started, I remember, jumping from trying to model a very basic prop and then immediately jumping into a character. And I remember it being a real struggle and it wasn't successful at all. And it's very, very easy to be discouraged whenever you're jumping into this stuff if you don't know the different layers of difficulty. So that's what this is going to be about, all about building you guys kind of like a 3D modeling roadmap. So learn smarter, not harder. So if we go in here, we have the levels of difficulty. And generally speaking, it's going to be props, environments, interiors are going to be better, or interiors are going to be easier than exteriors, and characters are going to be the hardest of all. So generally speaking, to get good at all of this stuff, if you're really, really working at it, this can be, a 3+ year, just to get the basics down. Generally speaking, junior artists in the industry work on props, mid-level is more environments, and then more senior level is going to be characters. So props, if we jump in here, start taking a look, those are going to be anything that can, any modeling, texturing that's going to exist in a world, but can also exist on its own. So when you first start, modeling, texturing, when you first start getting into 3D, try to focus on things that can be built very small and present them in that way. So doing things like this, where you have a phone, over here we have like a camera, things that can be really, really easy to present on just a backdrop, and get good at doing those before you move on to actually building bigger scenes. So environments. With environments, you want to start with doing interiors first. Anything that can be built of props, essentially. So if we go to interiors, you think of, we have a barbershop here, for example. All of these assets in here can be broken down into individual props. So obviously, interiors, something like this is going to be a bit more organic, which can be a little bit more difficult. But something like this, again, it's going to be older. It's going to be more organic. So the more organic you get, the more difficult it's going to be. But something like this, like an architectural interior, this stuff is really just existing props that are combined into one scene, essentially. So from there, we have exterior environments. So exterior environments is when you start to switch over to doing more organic surfaces. And generally speaking, you have hard surface and you have organic. So organic surfaces are going to be a little bit more difficult. So these are things are going to be like trains, trees, anything that can exist in nature. And these types of things are going to be done more procedurally. And you typically can use software like World Machine, SpeedTree. There's some add-ons for Blender that can do this kind of stuff too. And then characters. So characters are going to be the, kind of top level of difficulty when it comes to modeling and texturing. That's, you really got to understand topology for deformation. Typically, a lot of this stuff is going to be very handcrafted. Both the surface, the geometry, and the textures. We have things like the fur. We have things like this with hair. So it's both difficult from a technical perspective and a creative and aesthetic perspective as well. So levels of difficulty, hard surface, organic. So hard surface is going to be easier than organic. So hard surface can be, your props, your weapons. These good things could be like vehicles, anything that can be manufactured, or anything with hard edges and very clear primitive shapes within there. So like this would be like a, just a cube to start off with. We have a sphere right here. And of course, organic is going to be more like characters and things that exist in nature. So the other thing to really focus on when you're first starting out is the differences between assets and scenes. You want to build small and then replicate. So what this means here is this is going to be our finished scene. So we're going to build all the models and textures that are within this scene. But you don't want to start by just building, a book and then a candle. What you want to do is break these out into, individual files or individual collections if we're working in Blender, and get those looking as good as possible on their own, and then put them into a scene. So with a lot of this stuff, you can make a portfolio piece just by, utilizing individual props. That's where you should start, is by building assets, props, weapons, things like that. And then after you get good at building these props, then you can start to combine them into a bigger scene. So with that said, to jump over to my reel here and kind of give you just a breakdown of this frame right here. Each one of these files are built inside of an individual file. So we don't try to work with this stuff all at once. We get it looking as good as possible. And then once they're ready to go into a shot, we go through a scene assembly stage where we combine all the assets that went through the asset production. So with that said, in terms of difficulty level, junior artists typically focus on things like these props, things like this builder hut here, walls, and then the more senior level you get, you get into characters. So, traditionally speaking, I would say character artists, have been working for maybe 5 years before they really start to just focus on characters themselves. So, characters can be pretty serious stuff whenever you really get into it. So to wrap this up, generally speaking, start with props. Characters can be a few years down the road if you're just starting. And again, there's a huge gray area with this stuff. Some props can be difficult than some characters for sure. But this is generally speaking the levels of difficulty that you want to start whenever you're first starting out with modeling.